The five-star restaurant buzzed with quiet chatter, the clinking of silverware, and the soft hum of a piano in the corner. It was the kind of place where billionaires gathered to flaunt their wealth. At the center of the room sat Victor Kraus, a well-known billionaire investor from Germany. Dressed in a custom-tailored suit, he spoke loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, making sure everyone caught his arrogant remarks. When a young waitress approached his table with a warm smile and a polite, "Good evening, sir, may I take your order?" Victor's lips curled into a smirk. Leaning back in his chair, he muttered something in German, harsh words laced with disdain. He assumed no one around him would understand. His friends chuckled, impressed by his brazen mockery. But the waitress didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as if she had caught every syllable. "Careful," she said in perfect German, her voice calm yet sharp as glass. The billionaire froze mid-laugh. His smug smile vanished, and his friends turned wide-eyed to her. The entire restaurant seemed to pause, sensing a storm about to break. The billionaire's fork slipped from his hand, clattering against the porcelain plate. The sound drew even more attention from nearby tables. For the first time that evening, Victor Kraus wasn't in control. The waitress stood tall, her tray balanced effortlessly in one hand. She leaned forward just slightly, lowering her voice so only his table could hear, yet her words carried the weight of steel. "In case you didn't know," she continued fluently in German, "every word you said was heard. And every person at this table now knows exactly what kind of man you are." His friends shifted uncomfortably, some suppressing awkward laughs, others looking down at their menus as if wishing to disappear. Victor's jaw tightened, his pride visibly cracking under the weight of her unexpected comeback. One of his companions cleared his throat. "Victor, she speaks better German than you," he whispered nervously. The waitress then straightened her back, switching back to English with a poised smile. "Now, sir, would you like to order? Or would you prefer to continue embarrassing yourself?" The room erupted in muffled gasps. Patrons who had been pretending not to listen were now openly staring. Victor Kraus, the man who thrived on belittling others, sat red-faced and silent, stripped of his power in seconds. Victor Kraus cleared his throat, trying to mask his humiliation with forced laughter. "Ah, a joke, just a joke," he stammered, waving his hand dismissively. "Surely you can't take such things so seriously." But his voice lacked the confidence it once carried. His German accent, usually a source of intimidation, now only revealed his unease. The waitress kept her composure, her expression unreadable. She carefully set down a glass of water in front of him. "It's interesting," she said evenly, "how jokes often reveal the truth about what someone really thinks." The billionaire's smile faltered. His friends exchanged glances, some biting their lips to keep from laughing, not at her, but at him. The tables had turned. From the corner of the restaurant, the pianist missed a note, his eyes glued to the scene. The tension was undeniable, even the waitstaff had slowed down, pretending to busy themselves nearby just to catch every word. Victor leaned forward, lowering his voice in a desperate attempt to regain control. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he muttered. The waitress met his gaze without fear. "No," she replied calmly. "Just fluent." The billionaire sank back into his chair, his bravado shattered like glass underfoot. For the first time in years, Victor Kraus realized, he wasn't the one holding the spotlight. A ripple of whispers spread through the restaurant. Couples at nearby tables leaned closer, eager not to miss a single word. The billionaire, once the center of admiration, was now the subject of ridicule. One of Victor's friends finally broke the silence with a nervous chuckle. "Come on, Victor, maybe let her take the order before you dig yourself any deeper." His attempt at humor only made the humiliation sting sharper. The waitress, still composed, placed her pen against the notepad. "So," she said smoothly, "will it be the chef's special tonight, or would you prefer to keep pretending you're in control here?" A few diners covered their mouths, muffling their laughter. Someone at the back even clapped once before catching themselves. Victor's face turned a shade of crimson no expensive wine could match. His ego was screaming for him to lash out, but the weight of every watching eye pressed down harder. If he exploded, it would only confirm everything she'd already exposed. Grinding his teeth, he forced himself to speak evenly. "Fine," he snapped. "The chef's special. And bring the best bottle of wine you have." The waitress jotted it down without flinching. "Excellent choice, sir," she replied, her tone dripping with professionalism, but everyone could hear the edge of triumph beneath it. As she turned to leave, Victor's friends leaned toward him, whispering frantically, "She destroyed you, Victor. You're never living this down." The billionaire gripped his napkin so tightly it tore in half. The waitress returned minutes later, carrying the chef's special and the finest bottle of wine in the house. Her movements were graceful, every step deliberate, as if she were setting the stage for a final act. She placed the plate in front of Victor with care, then poured the wine into his glass. As she did, she leaned just slightly closer and, in perfect German once again, said softly but firmly, "Power means nothing if it disappears the moment someone understands you." The words sliced through the air sharper than any insult. Victor's hand trembled as he lifted his glass, trying to appear unbothered, but the shake betrayed him. This time, the crowd didn't bother hiding their reactions. A wave of laughter spread through the restaurant. Some clapped openly, others raised their glasses in admiration of the waitress's fearless stand. Even the pianist let out a chuckle before quickly returning to his melody. Victor's friends leaned back, some shaking their heads, others smirking at his downfall. His reputation as the untouchable billionaire had crumbled in front of strangers, all because he underestimated someone he thought powerless. The waitress straightened, gave a polite nod, and walked away with the quiet confidence of someone who had just shifted the balance of the room. For the first time in his life, Victor Kraus realized money couldn't buy him respect. And in that moment, he had been exposed completely, by a waitress who refused to bow to his arrogance. By the time dessert was served at other tables, the scene had already become the talk of the restaurant. Diners whispered, replaying every sharp word the waitress had delivered, their admiration for her courage spreading like wildfire. Unbeknownst to Victor, several guests had discreetly pulled out their phones. The moment she fired back in flawless German had been caught on video, his smug grin dissolving into silence, her calm confidence dismantling his arrogance piece by piece. Within hours, clips began circulating online. "Billionaire gets exposed by waitress" trended across platforms. Millions watched, commenting on how satisfying it was to see a man of power humbled by someone he thought invisible. Reporters picked up the story the next day. Headlines splashed across websites, "Arrogant investor put in his place by waitress's fluent reply." Business analysts chimed in, noting how damaging the incident could be to Victor's carefully curated image. Meanwhile, the waitress returned to work as usual. She wasn't chasing fame, she had only stood her ground. But the restaurant's phone rang non-stop, people reserving tables just to meet the woman who had silenced a billionaire. Victor, on the other hand, avoided the press entirely. For a man who thrived on being admired, his greatest fear had come true, the world now saw him as a punchline. And all it took was a single comeback, in the language he thought gave him power. A week later, the restaurant was busier than ever. Tourists, journalists, even celebrities came just to sit in the place where a billionaire had been silenced. The waitress found herself at the center of attention, though she handled it with the same calm professionalism that had made her stand out that night. Offers began to pour in. A publishing house wanted her to write a memoir. A television network reached out for interviews. Even a prestigious language academy contacted her, offering a teaching position after being impressed by her mastery of German and English alike. But what surprised her most was the gratitude from everyday people. Letters and messages flooded in, "Thank you for showing that money doesn't buy respect. You inspired me to stand up for myself at work. You reminded us that dignity is priceless." As for Victor Kraus, he remained silent. His publicists scrambled to repair his image, but every attempt was overshadowed by the viral video. His name had become synonymous with arrogance undone. One evening, as the waitress closed her shift, the restaurant manager pulled her aside. "You've brought more honor to this place than any famous guest ever could," he said warmly. "From now on, your position here is whatever you want it to be." She smiled, humbled but resolute. That night had not been about glory, it had been about refusing to let someone strip away her dignity. And now, the world knew that true power didn't come from wealth or status. It came from courage, and the ability to speak up when no one expected it. Weeks passed, and the buzz around the story only grew louder. The video had crossed over into mainstream news, late-night talk shows replaying the clip and comedians using Victor's downfall as material for their monologues. But for the waitress, something unexpected happened. She was invited to speak at a business conference, not as staff, but as a keynote guest. The organizers explained, "Your story represents integrity. It's a reminder that respect is earned, not bought." Standing on stage in front of hundreds of executives, she shared her perspective. "It wasn't about humiliating anyone," she said. "It was about reminding people that words matter, and no one is above being held accountable." The audience gave her a standing ovation. Cameras flashed. Articles the next morning praised her speech as a masterclass in humility and strength. Meanwhile, Victor withdrew further from public view. A man who once boasted about being untouchable now struggled to show his face in high society without whispers following him. Investors quietly distanced themselves, wary of being linked to his arrogance. The waitress, however, continued to rise. Universities offered her honorary recognition. A major nonprofit even asked her to be a spokesperson for workplace dignity campaigns. Her life had changed forever, but not because she sought fame. It was because she had spoken the truth when it mattered most. And in doing so, she had turned one billionaire's insult into a global lesson about respect. It was a quiet afternoon at the restaurant when the doors suddenly swung open. Victor Krauss stepped inside, his presence heavy, his suit immaculate but his expression tired. Conversations hushed instantly, everyone recognized him. The waitress, now something of a local icon, was carrying a tray of drinks when she noticed him. Her posture didn't falter, she simply walked to his table, as calm as the first night. "Good afternoon, Mr. Krauss," she said evenly, her tone professional but firm. "A table for one?" The billionaire's eyes narrowed. He hadn't come to eat, he had come to reclaim something he had lost. "You think you ruined me," he said in a low voice, "but I'm still Victor Krauss. I can buy this entire place if I want." The waitress placed the tray down, leaning slightly closer so only he could hear. "And yet, here you are. At my table. On my terms." For a moment, silence stretched between them. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Victor's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. His threats, once powerful, now sounded hollow. Finally, she straightened and smiled politely. "Respect isn't for sale, Mr. Krauss. You'll find it's the one thing your money can't buy." Gasps rippled across the room. Victor's shoulders stiffened, and without another word, he stood and walked out. This time, no one laughed at him, they simply watched as a man who had once controlled the world walked away defeated. The door closed behind Victor, leaving the restaurant buzzing with disbelief. Guests murmured to one another, realizing they had just witnessed the final act of a billionaire's downfall. The waitress, however, returned to her duties as if nothing had happened. She wasn't chasing applause or headlines, she had already learned the greatest truth, that standing your ground spoke louder than wealth ever could. In the weeks that followed, Victor quietly disappeared from the public eye. His companies suffered as investors lost faith in his judgment. Once admired for his boldness, he was now remembered only for the viral video that stripped away his facade. His legacy, once golden, had become a cautionary tale. The waitress's life, on the other hand, took a remarkable turn. She accepted invitations to speak at universities, organizations, and events worldwide. Her words inspired countless people to value dignity, courage, and self-respect above all else. One evening, as she walked home beneath the glow of city lights, her phone buzzed with yet another message from a stranger. "Thank you for reminding me to stand up for myself. You changed my life." She smiled softly, realizing her story had grown beyond her. What began as a moment of defiance in a crowded restaurant had become a movement, a reminder to the world that respect is universal, and arrogance always crumbles when faced with truth. And so, the waitress who refused to bow to wealth became a symbol far greater than herself. While the billionaire faded into silence, her voice carried on, resonating in the hearts of millions. Months later, the viral moment was no longer just a trending clip, it had become a defining story, retold in articles, podcasts, and documentaries. People referred to it as the restaurant showdown. The waitress's name was now known far beyond the city. She had written a book, Fluent in Respect, which quickly became a bestseller. It wasn't about the billionaire, but about the importance of dignity, language, and courage in everyday life. She traveled to schools, inspiring young people to speak up for themselves, to embrace education, and to never let arrogance silence them. Wherever she went, crowds cheered, not because she had embarrassed a billionaire, but because she had reminded the world that character matters more than status. Meanwhile, Victor Kraus lived in near exile. Once invited to elite gatherings, he now received only whispers and side glances. His empire shrank quietly, piece by piece, as his name remained tied to his humiliation. He had become a lesson, not a leader. One journalist summed it up perfectly: he tried to make himself bigger by making others small. But it only took one voice, steady and unshaken, to expose how fragile his power really was. And that voice, the waitress's voice, continued to echo, long after the billionaires had faded. A year after the incident, the restaurant hosted a gala to celebrate its anniversary. The city's most influential figures attended, but the spotlight wasn't on them, it was on the waitress who had once stood her ground in that very dining room. As she took the stage to thank the guests, the room fell silent. The same walls that once echoed with Victor Kraus's arrogance now carried her voice, calm, strong, and unforgettable. "I never set out to humiliate anyone," she told the audience. That night was about something simple: respect. We all deserve it, no matter who we are, no matter where we come from. And the moment we remember that, we take away power from those who use it to belittle others. The audience erupted in applause, some even wiping away tears. Reporters captured every word, headlines the next morning calling her the woman who redefined respect. As she stepped down from the stage, she glanced toward the back of the room. For a moment, she thought she saw Victor Kraus watching from the shadows, but when she blinked, the space was empty. Whether he had been there or not didn't matter anymore. Because his story had ended, and hers had only just begun. The waitress walked forward into her new life, not as someone who once silenced a billionaire, but as someone who reminded the world that true power lies in dignity, courage, and a voice that refuses to be silenced. Months after her book tour ended, the waitress was invited to speak at an international summit on leadership and ethics. Leaders from around the world filled the grand hall, eager to hear the woman who had turned a single moment into a global lesson. When she stepped up to the podium, the applause was thunderous. She waited until the room quieted, then spoke with the same calm clarity that had once silenced a billionaire in a restaurant. Power fades. Money fades. But how you treat people, that lasts forever. The night I answered back, I didn't think I was making history. I was simply refusing to let arrogance stand unchallenged. And that's something anyone, anywhere, can do. Her words echoed through the hall, drawing another standing ovation. Cameras flashed, and news outlets carried her message across the globe. She was no longer just the waitress who exposed a billionaire, she had become a voice for fairness, dignity, and strength. In the end, Victor Kraus's name faded into a cautionary footnote in business journals, a reminder of how quickly arrogance could destroy a legacy. But her name, her story, lived on, inspiring countless people to speak with courage when it mattered most. It was the final proof that respect, once claimed, could never be taken away. Years later, the story of that night was still remembered, not as a scandal, but as a turning point. Universities taught it as a case study in leadership and ethics. Motivational speakers quoted her words. And people across the world continued to share the video that started it all. The Waitress, now an accomplished author and respected voice on dignity and courage, had long since left the restaurant behind. Yet she often returned, sitting quietly at a corner table, remembering the night everything changed. One evening, as she signed copies of her book for a group of students, one young woman asked, "Do you ever regret speaking up?" She smiled, her eyes steady. Not for a second. Because silence would have meant agreeing. And the moment we allow arrogance to go unchallenged, we lose a piece of ourselves. The students nodded, inspired. They weren't just hearing a story, they were inheriting a lesson that would shape their own lives. Meanwhile, Victor Krause's name had all but vanished. His companies dissolved, his empire scattered, his legacy erased by his own arrogance. He had become a cautionary tale, while she became a beacon of integrity. And so, what began as a single act of courage in a crowded dining room grew into a timeless reminder that respect cannot be bought, power cannot silence truth, and dignity belongs to those who claim it. Her voice, steady, fluent, and unshaken, had outlasted the billionaire's empire. It was, and always would be, her victory.